another another video for today. First video of the day, a country's video for today. So yeah. So we're on Iceland today, and it's starting significantly later than many of the others, as they've always started towards the end of the last ice age or a couple of thousand years before Christ, if not a couple of hundred, if not a couple of hundred years afterwards. This one starts 8-9 centuries afterwards, so yeah. As the first people to settle Iceland were probably Irish monks who went to Iceland in the 8th century, but were likely driven out by the Vikings in the 9th century, so they didn't have too much luck, to say the least. And according to tradition, the first Viking to discover Iceland was a man named Nadadur, who got lost while on his way to the Faroe Islands, and following him a Swede named Gardar Svavarsson circumnavigated around Iceland in sometime around 860. But the first Viking attempt to settle was by a Norwegian named Froki Fyrgarorsson. Sorry for butchering of the names. And he landed on the northwest, but a severe winter killed his domestic animals, and it was kind of forced to go back to Norway. And he gave the land its name, as he called it Iceland. And from 874, many settlers came to Iceland from Norway and the Viking colonies in the British Isles. And a Norwegian named Ingolfur Arnarsson led them, and he sailed with his family, slaves and animals. As slavery was a thing and still is a thing. When he sighted Iceland, Ingolfur dedicated his wooden post to his gods and then threw them overboard, and he vowed to settle at the place where the sea washed them up, and then he explored Iceland. When the posts were found in the southwest of Iceland, Ingolfur and his household settled there, in a place where he called Reykjavik, meaning Smoky Bay, and many other Vikings followed him to Iceland. And the land of Iceland was free to whoever wanted it, and a man could claim as much land as he could light fires around one day, while a woman could claim as much land as she could lead a heifer round in one day. And there was good fishing grounds around Iceland, and the land was well suited to sheep, minus volcanoes, which we know in today, as many Vikings brought flocks with them, and soon sheep became a major Icelandic industry, and the population of Iceland soared, but when by about 930 there were about 60,000 people living in Iceland. And first the Icelandic people were ruled by chiefs called Godar, but there were some local assemblies around 930. The Icelandic people created an assembly for the whole island called the Althing. And in the 11th century, Norwegians were converted to Christianity, and the Norwegian king sent missionaries to Iceland. And some of the Icelandic people accepted the new religion, but many bitterly opposed Christianity. And eventually a man named Thorgeir, who was a law speaker of the Althing, realised there were likely to be a civil war between the two. He may have feared Norwegian intervention, and the Norwegians were quite prepared to convert to Christianity by force, and persuaded people to accept a compromise, as Christianity became the official religion, but pagans were allowed to worship the gods in private. And in 1079, Iceland had to pay tithes to the church, and in other words, they had to pay 1/10 of their produce. And as a result, the church grew rich and powerful, and paganism was stamped out, and monasteries were built. In Iceland, I was given a bishop in 1056. And in 1106, another bishopric was created in Holar in the north, but in 1152, the Icelandic church came under new authority of a Norwegian archbishop. In those days, the church was closely allied to the state, and when the Icelandic church became a subordinate to the Norwegian church, it meant that the Norwegian king's influence in Iceland slowly increased. And during the 15th century, conditions on Iceland started to deteriorate, as it may have been partly due to overgrazing, and forests were also cut down, and as a result was soil erosion. With no wood to build ships, the Icelandic people were dependent on the Norwegian merchants, and at the time worn animal hides and horses and falcons were exported from Iceland. Timber, honey and malt for brewing were imported, and some Icelandic people began to look to the King of Norway to protect their trade. And the Icelandic Commonwealth was also undermined by a few feuding clans. And then in 1218, a man named Snorri Sturlung visited Norway and agreed to support the king's interest in Iceland, and returned home in 1220. Meanwhile, the bishops who were born in Norway also supported the Norwegian king's ambitions to rule Iceland. But the Commonwealth really ended because of the feuding between clans, and the Icelandic people desperately wanted peace, and they eventually realised the one way to obtain it was to submit to the Norwegian king. And therefore, in 1262, an agreement called the Ancient Covenant was accepted by the Althing, and the Icelanders agreed to pay tax of wool and cloth each year. And in return, the king promised to uphold law and order in Iceland. And he also replaced the Godar with royal officials. And in 1280, a new constitution was drawn up, and the Althing continued to meet, but its decisions had to be ratified by the king. Furthermore, the king appointed a governor and 12 local sheriffs to rule. And at the same time, slavery was slowly dying out in Iceland. And in the 14th and early 15th centuries, troubled years for Iceland. In the early 14th century, the climate grew colder, and in 1402 and 1403, the Black Death struck Iceland and the population was devastated. But prosperity did return by the 15th century, and at the same time there was a big demand in Europe for Icelandic cod. Iceland grew rich on the fishing industry, as Icelandic people traded with the English and with the Germans. But at the time there was no single German state, but German ports were joined together in a federation called the Hanseatic League, kind of thing. Meanwhile, in 1397, Norway was united with Denmark, and after Iceland was ruled by the Danish crown. And during the 16th century, Iceland, like the rest of Europe, was kind of rocked by the Reformation, as Denmark became Protestant in the 1530s, and in 1539 a Danish king ordered his men to confiscate the church's land in Iceland, as the bishops of Iceland resisted, and in 1541 the Danish king sent an expedition to inform conformity, as Skarholt was given a new bishop, but the Bishop of Holla, a man named John Aransson, continued to resist, and he was a powerful chieftain as well as a bishop, and he had soldiers to fight for him. And he also had 2 sons by a concubine, breaking the act of celibacy and all that, who supported him. And in 1548, Aranson was declared an outlaw, and his soldiers were captured by the Protestant bishop Skyholt, but in 1550 he was defeated as Aranson and his two sons were executed. And afterwards the people of Iceland gradually accepted Protestantism, and in 1584 the Bible was translated into Icelandic. But during the 17th century, the Icelandic people suffered hardships as in 1602 the king made all trade to Iceland a monopoly of certain merchants in Copenhagen, like Malmo and Elsinore. And in 1619 the monopoly was made a joint stock company, and the monopoly meant that Icelandic people were forced to sell goods to the company at low prices and buy supplies from them at a high price, and as a result the Icelandic economy suffered severely. Furthermore, in 1661 the Danish king made himself an absolute monarch. In 1660 the Icelandic people were forced to submit to him, and the Irish king continued to meet but had no real power, as it was used to be in a court. And what was worse, in 1707 to 1709 Iceland suffered an outbreak of smallpox which killed a large part of the population. And by the mid-18th century a man named Skulli Magnusson was made an official called Fogd. I think it's, sorry if I mispronounce anything. They tried to improve the economy by bringing in farmers from Denmark and Norway. And he also introduced better fishing vessels. And he also created a woolen industry in Reykjavik, with German weavers. And finally in 1787 the monopoly was ended. But in 1783 the fallout from a volcanic eruptions caused devastation in Iceland, and by 1786 the population of Iceland was only 38,000. Finally in 1800 everything closed and a new law court came through to replace it, and as it sat in Reykjavik, which at the time was a community of about 300 people. And in the 19th century ties between Iceland and Denmark weakened, and nationalism was a growing force throughout Europe, including Iceland. And a sign of this growing power was the life writing of a song, O Girl of Ours, land in 1874. And in 1843 the Danish king decided to Christian VIII recall the other thing, and it met again in 1845, but had little power. There's a few things going on today. Then in 1904 the power post of governor was abolished, and Iceland was granted home rule, but keeping it in the 19th century for a little longer. In 1854 remaining restrictions on trade were removed, and trade with Iceland was reopened to all nations, and furthermore Icelandic fishing became much more prosperous towards the end of the late 19th century, until the fishermen usually used rowing boats in the end of the century and switched to much more effective decking sailing ships. And moving on into the 20th century, Iceland began to prosper once again, and the population rose despite to great immigrations like Canada and all that. And in 1911 Reykjavik University was founded, and in the 20th century ties with Denmark were loosened, and 1984 Iceland was granted home rule, and the place of governor was abolished, and instead Iceland gained an Icelandic minister responsible for to everything. And then in 1918, Iceland was made a sovereign state, sharing a monarchy with Denmark. And in 1915, women were allowed to vote. The first woman to elect to the thing was in 1922. And then in 1940, Iceland was occupied by British troops. And in May 1981, the Americans relieved them. And in 1944, Iceland and Denmark. Kind of a little harsh considering Denmark was still occupied by the Germans at the time. With Denmark and a joint monarchy was dissolved. And in 1947, Mount Hekla erupted, causing much destruction, but Iceland soon recovered, and in 1949, Iceland joined NATO. And in the late 20th century, Iceland had a series of cod wars. Friends shared a story on Facebook. And Iceland was relied on its fishing industry and grew alarmed that the British were overfishing in its waters, as the supposed cod wars were fought in 1959 to 1961, in 1972, and in 1975 to 1976.
I got most of the blackberry, y'all. I got most of the blackberry, y'all.
And in 1980, Vigdis Finnbogadóttir, sorry if I mispronounced that, was elected President of Ireland, and was in all probably the first woman elected as president in the world. Monarchy is something different, as there's been many female queens and all throughout history and all, until which was one first to an elected position that high. And moving into the 21st century, people of Iceland benefit from natural hot water, which is used to heat their homes and to heat greenhouses. And in March 2006, the USA announced it was withdrawing its armed forces from Iceland. And in 2008, Iceland suffered an economic crisis when its three main banks failed. In 2009, demonstrations led to the fall of the government. Today, Iceland still relies on fishing, as well as sheep, cattle, and Icelandic ponies. Alright, top. I think you on top underneath. Well, Iceland suffered badly in the world financial crisis that began in 2008, and unemployment rose to over 9%, but soon recovered and all, and unemployment fell. And today Iceland has a high standard of living, and the population of Iceland stands at around 339,000. And unlike yesterday, we're back to the short paragraph on languages and all. So yeah, as an Icelandic language, Icelandic Islenska, national language of Iceland, spoken by the entire population by the early 21st century, and belongs with Norwegian and Faroese to the west, and Scandinavian group of Northern Germanic languages, developed from a Norse speech brought by settlers from western Norway in the 9th and 10th centuries. As Old Icelandic is usually called Old Norse, and is a language in which Eddas sagas and the skaldic poems were written in the Middle Ages, and by the time from one of those job finding sites. By the time these works were written, several electoral characteristics that differentiate Icelandic from Norwegian had emerged. And it's like finishing the paragraph on language and going on a little bit about legends and all, as there's not much more, as Iceland is a country that has the striking natural beauty, despite its many volcanoes and all, which can be matched by like a rich and extensive folklore. Yeah. As surveys report about, as some reports say that 10% of Icelanders believe in supernatural beings, while 10% do not, while the remaining 8% who have no strong feelings either way or refuse to deny their existence entirely. So yeah, and they're probably wanting like a bit more proof for them, kind of thing. As a belief in Hudufok, hidden people or elves, is fairly common to such an extent that roadwork projects that run into trouble are sometimes said to be angering local elves, and a medium must be consulted before work can continue. Yeah. And like Norway yesterday, there were reports of trolls and all, and some locals are, if locals are to believe. And learning about the country's folklore is a unique way to experience like Icelandic culture of sorts, and is not really a common experience. Yeah. And we're going through otherworldly sites in Iceland before. So yeah. The first of which is Eidfall. Yeah, it's like everywhere, whether in like a populated city or a middle of like nowhere kind of thing, you're likely to come across an Eidfall. And these are small wooden houses people construct for the benefit of elves, who are said to live in them. And you may even see like very small churches which are the benefits for the elves, who are said to live in them. And you may even see like small churches which are created for the purpose of converting elves to Christianity. And these homes range from like simple to quite an elaborate little church and homes and all. And it's like seeing how many you can find in Iceland can be a pastime and all. Like amusing pastime and all that. But you're unlikely to see the elves though. Then there's special times for Hudufok. A certain holiday seems to bring like the Hudufok out of hiding in Iceland. And it's what I kind of see it during New Year's Eve, like the 12th night, midsummer or Christmas night. And expected to hear folk tales of elves holding parties or human hosting bonfires for them. And it is also an Icelandic custom to clear the house and leave food for the Hudufok on Christmas. As a tradition you may wish to participate and from aboard your cruise if you're there at the right time, as midsummer nights brings a chance to sit at a crossroad and have a Hudufok offer you great gifts, but the real reward comes from refusing them or the trolls of Vik. And if you decide to visit the black beach sands in Vik, you'll probably encounter a troll of sorts, And according to local legend, the site is worth a visit on its way, as it's the world's most enchanting beach. Is tucked away near a very, very small city. And if you look off the shore, however, you'll notice basalt rocks, a formation known as Drangar. As the legend says, these rocks aren't really trolls who were caught in the sunlight, and as they try to drag ships ashore, they turn forever to stone. And speaking of the sea, there's supposed sea monsters and all. There's monsters known in Iceland as Skemsli, may live in the sea, according to many. British spoke to Thorvaldur Fredriksson, a scholar of sea monsters, who keeps an open mind about the possibility of there being sea monsters, said as some of these monsters are dangerous, he said, and people are reluctant to tell about them because others will laugh. Well, about 70% of the earth is sea, and who knows what the sea hides. End of quote. No, it's like I think they've only discovered only about 5% of the oceans and all that. And there's Elf School. And it's like if you're interested in Icelandic folklore, the Elf School in Reykjavik may be a vital stop while you're in the area, as the school offers a very brief course on folklore, elves, fairies, trolls, dwarves, and more, so you can kind of be able to speak with Icelandic folklore and all. The school identifies 13 types of elves, and has a full curriculum of study devoted to complete with textbooks and all, as the school offers a tour of the habitats in the fork as well, which ends as pleasantly as possible with coffee and pancakes, and you'll even get a diploma in it if you're looking to study Icelandic folklore and all that. And there's like a book on Icelandic folklore, as you might want to consider picking up a copy of like the Traveller's Guide to Icelandic Folklore by Jon R. Esmarsson. And the book functions as a guided tour, inviting you to explore certain areas of the country associated with myths as told as Eddas, as well as like the 19th century, as new as the 19th century, where you choose to use it in that way or to simply to luxury stay in your cabin and to read about the wonderful like the Icelandic folklore and all that. It could be essential item to take to Iceland or when you trip to Iceland and all. So yeah. And it's like I know someone who went to Iceland, despite them eating kiwis the entire time. They kind of enjoyed it. And it's like a note of warning when they went swimming and all that. As there's like no chlorine in like the swimming pools and all that. You kind of have to stand in like the nude and all that as they spray you with chlorine and all that. Like before you go in and like afterwards, I think. Like some pool bodies of water and all. So yeah. I'll see you all later on, and yeah, bye for now.